views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
All right, well, coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, blockchain is a disruptive technology that puts together a safe and global platform for businesses and individuals. This technology helps to create and certify a variety of transactions. It sounds very technical, and that is why we have an expert on tonight's show to explain how blockchain may help you. Then later in the show, we are back discussing Airbnb. But this time, how does it affect you as an owner of a co-op or a condominium? As you can see, we have much to get to. So stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. Hello and welcome to Today's Verdict, a live and interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet us at Today's Verdict and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. Also, make sure to like us on Facebook at Today's Verdict and check us out at bronxnet.tv/Bronx Legal. And last, but certainly not least, don't forget to tweet me at David Lesh. Well, blockchain and smart contracts disqualify the dependency of authority of a central government. How? By eliminating the possibility of manual error. Kind of scary as well. Well, joining us on set to help us get a better understanding is attorney Joshua Ashley Clayman, and I understand I can call you Josh. Am I correct?
Yes.
I want you to know I've spent hours trying to understand this topic, and I said trying to understand because I still don't understand it, and that's why you're here. Blockchain, please just start us off.
Absolutely. Well, the simplest way I can put it, blockchain has been said by some to be something that's going to change the world.
Okay.
Now, this is a very ambitious statement, right? It's been called the internet without a browser.
Okay.
Everything is in building blocks right now. So you're not the only one who doesn't understand it.
From what I understand, and generally in all types of transactions, financial transactions throughout life, and certainly in business, there's always seems to be a middleman. Say buying stock, right? You buy stock, you have to make sure that the trade settles. It takes you a day or two before you find out whether you've actually gotten the stock. And from what I was reading, this blockchain wipes out the middleman and things move quickly.
That is how, yes, that is the theory.
Okay.
Right? Now, whether it completely wipes out the middleman remains to be seen. I mean, many of the middlemen are themselves trying to invest in blockchain technology. So I can go into that in a little bit, but would you like me to start by describing blockchain?
If you could just describe the term itself, what does it really mean?
Okay. So when you hear block and chain, it's a good visual, okay? If you imagine a global spreadsheet in your mind, okay? Only it's not on one computer, it's on millions of computers. So no one person has control of the blockchain. No one person can go change something in it. And then if you think of each bit of data, and each bit of data is in a block of data, so to speak. And those blocks are arranged in chronological order. And in a sense, they're interlocking in a chain. What I mean by that is each successive block in the chain contains all of the information from the preceding block. So in a sense, people like to say that the blockchain is immutable, right? It's not entirely immutable, but it's as immutable as we can make it right now. So that you can't go back and change something in the past because you've got all these eyes watching you.
All right, now is there a central figure that overlooks the blocks themselves, or do many people have their hand in the creation of the blocks?
Well, without getting into too much detail, there are two different kinds of blockchain.
All right.
So there's the public blockchain, which you may have heard of, for example, the Bitcoin blockchain or the Ethereum blockchain. There are some other blockchains. For those, no, there's no central government, there's no central authority. In fact, many of the people who developed the initial blockchain, the initial public blockchain, They have a very libertarian bent, right? They want there to be consensus. They don't want there to be one controlling party, okay? And the idea is that by having all of these people who have to verify the transaction, all of these eyes watching, you can have trust between parties that you might not normally have trust between. A private blockchain is a little bit different. So when you hear about investment banks and large corporations, accounting firms, consulting firms developing their own blockchains, those are private blockchains, and those would have an administrator.
Now, how do the big financial institutions feel about the fact that they're being pushed out? They're not making the 1% or the 2% fee to verify the transactions that the blockchain now no longer needs.
Well, I think a couple of things. So, yes, the banks are not needed for a Bitcoin transaction, for example, where you have a digital currency that's being transferred. But these very banks, about 90%, between 80 and 90% of banks right now in the world are investing in blockchain. They either have outside investments or they have an incubator within their own bank that's developing this. Now, why are they doing this? Because, well, number one, they want to stay involved. I mean, there's each year 1.7 trillion in bank fees. I mean, that's 2% of the world's economy. But if I may,
Sure.
Beyond that, they have cost savings for themselves. So things like know your customer and anti-money laundering types of things, if you put that data on the blockchain, it helps the banks save money. And there's a lot of ways the banks and others can save money.
Well, just play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
The blockchain is called a disruptor for a reason. It's disrupting the status quo, right?
Absolutely.
It's disrupting the fact that these banks really won't be needed, or another entity won't be needed to verify what's really going on. But from what my research shows, is that it may move too quickly, and if it's disrupting the institution, it can throw everything into chaos. Is that not accurate?
I think there's always the risk.
Okay.
There's always the risk with things like that. An example I can give, and this leads to smart contracts and how they relate to the blockchain, and then I can go into a specific example of how sometimes you may get a little bit ahead of yourself.
All right.
So a smart contract, at its most basic, is a computer protocol code that overlays the blockchain and sort of tells the data in the blockchain what to do. So the simplest version of a smart contract would be a vending machine.
Sure.
Right? You pick out what kind of food you want, you put in money, and once that money goes in, your food, if it's not broken, pops out.
Gotcha.
And you don't need another human involved. You don't need someone verifying something. It just happens. So a smart contract, in essence, is something with logic. If this, then that. Okay? An example of maybe how some people may have moved too quickly. There's a tension between when you have a written contract, right? When you write a contract between parties, you make sure every last word is right. You don't want to leave it open to ambiguity. You don't want a loophole that you didn't intend, right? You want to have a meeting of the minds. You want your lawyer or whomever is drafting it to get it perfect.
So
right?
blockchain will make sure that each one of the provisions in the contract will be included,
Well, I think
theoretically.
where I was going with this, because blockchain has many possibilities. Where I was going with this is with a smart contract, it's written in computer code. Computer coders, when you get a new phone or you get a new program, there are bugs, right?
Sure.
These things are launched and people expect there to be bugs and they expect to clean them up later. There's a real tension between knowing what you say is going to happen in this smart contract in words, what you think you understand, and what's in the code. And there's also a question of, do you have to have the code absolutely perfect? Now an actual real world example, is with the DAO. There was this organization called the DAO. It did a crowdfund using digital currency. It raised 150 million in digital currency extremely quickly. It was the fastest crowdfund ever. Unfortunately, in the computer code, there was this ability to create what they called a recursive feature. So meaning you could take out money and you could just keep taking it out. Like imagine you go to an ATM
just throws money
and you just keep taking it out, repeating the transaction. So someone who was aware of this took advantage of it. Now, people may say, well, that wasn't part of the contract, but it was part of the code. So there's a tension between law is law and code is law.
Well,
And
legally, what are we looking at here? What laws would seem to control or govern a blockchain?
that's a very good question.
Well, thank you.
I think that's something we're all wrestling with. I mean, there are jurisdictional issues. Where does a blockchain live? There are questions about our existing laws. For example, Delaware. Delaware as a state has embraced a blockchain initiative whereby they're going to put back office and UCC1s and other sorts of things on blockchain, right? But they realize that as they're contemplating trading securities on blockchain, a lot of the existing laws contemplate, say, a custodian, right? Or if you have things in the UCC, if you're trying to have a security interest in things, they contemplate a world that we now have that we may not have later. So in Delaware, it's been proposed that some of their statutes be amended to provide for blockchain. There are a lot of questions about that. There are a lot of questions about if you have, for example, a startup and it wants to do an initial token offering, so it's going to offer digital currency, right? Digital, not equity securities, but these tokens. Are those securities under federal securities laws? Well,
Right, you
right?
don't know.
There's a lot of questions. A lot of questions.
By the way, just so we know your contact information, how you've become so fluent in this area, tell us a
Sure.
little about you.
Sure. I am of counsel at Morrison & Forster. My day-to-day practice prior to this was finance. So I'm a finance and corporate lawyer, and I became very interested in blockchain and smart contracts because I saw that many of our clients, aside from what they were doing in transactions, were actually developing blockchain initiatives on the side. So I pitched it to my firm along with some other colleagues, and we grew a group. So now we have about 50 partners around the world, throughout the US, Europe, and Asia, overlaying many practices.
Well, it's very exciting. I mean, it's a very exciting area.
It is.
I'm just afraid, you put too many coins into the vending machine and you don't get your food at all because the machine just breaks. So, but I can understand that in time, it could just flow very seamlessly. But I just need to get past, the fact that there's so many people have their hands in making sure that the blocks are created. But I can see the potential of the system.
Well, what I can say, I can't put it better than this. When the World Economic Forum this summer released its report on blockchain, they called it the future of financial services, and Giancarlo Brunei, the head of financial institutions for the World Economic Forum, he said, and this is a near quote, he said, rather than stay at the margins of the global financial services industry, blockchain will become the very beating heart of it.
Well, we'll hold you to it, and we'll
So.
see you in 6 months, and you'll come back and let us know.
All right, sounds good.
All right,
Sounds
well, we
good.
have to take a quick break, but don't worry. We'll be back with more Today's Verdict right after this.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
Adopting a new pet is a rewarding experience. And Shelter Pets make super pets. Your new best friend will steal your heart, bring you happiness, and enrich your life for years to come. You can make a difference in the life of an animal. Adopt and bring home a shelter pet today. To find out more, visit theshelterpetproject.org.
Hey, I'm Darren Jaime. I'm the host of Wednesdays Open right here on BronxNet Television, Channel 67, and also on Verizon Files, Channel 33. Want to invite you every Wednesday. You get an opportunity to see what's going on in the world of news, current events, debates, public information. That's what happens here on Open every Wednesday. So we invite you to join us right here on BronxNet Television.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
I love taking care of my mom. It wasn't easy at first. She learned how to better communicate her needs.
And you learned how to not ignore yours.
I discovered how to make healthier meals.
And I discovered how much I enjoyed them.
Becoming a caregiver is a learning experience for everyone. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
All right, well, welcome back to today's verdict. I am your host, David Lesh. We are always encouraging you to stay connected. Tweet us at today's verdict. All right, well, last week our discussion on Airbnb generated so many responses from our viewers that we decided to continue the topic tonight. But this time, we want to see how the co-op and condo community is affected by the unique sharing of Airbnb users. Joining us now are attorney Stephen Slackus and Jared Pyoff. Stephen and Jared, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Let's start from where it all began. Let's back up. What's a condo? What's a condo? What's a condominium? What is this?
A condominium is real property,
right,
where you actually own your unit, as opposed to a co-op, that when you buy into a cooperative apartment building, you're actually buying shares in a corporation.
Okay. Airbnb.
Yes.
And we'll shift a little bit to Jared at this point. Airbnb gives the average person the right to be able to live where they want to live. I mean, not live or share somebody's home for a certain amount of time. And it's taken off, as we know, because last week we were discussing it and the viewers seem to like it. But legally, we have some problems with Airbnb. Tell me some of the issues that you find Airbnb and some of your clients are dealing with.
Sure. So just to give an overview of the law, there's actually a recent law that was passed a couple of weeks ago that Governor Cuomo signed that actually imposed more stringent regulations on actually advertising on Airbnb and other apartment share websites. There was an amendment to the multiple dwelling law that was passed in 2011 that provides that in any Class A multiple dwelling, which is essentially, if we're talking about Manhattan, any multiple dwelling that's 4 or more units, cannot have anyone stay in an apartment without the permanent occupant there if the person staying in the apartment is residing there for less than 30 consecutive days at a time, or paying for their stay for less than 30 consecutive days at a time.
Okay, so what that means is I'm not allowed to not be at my condo and have somebody else stay there for less than 30 days. Really, it's really what we're talking about. So I can't say, why don't you come and stay in my place, give me some money, I'm gonna leave, but for 2 weeks, you can stay. Doesn't work that way. We talk about 30 days and above, but certainly not less than 30 days. Am I correct?
That's correct. And I mean, there are limited exceptions, but the limited exception does not apply if they're paying compensation for their stay. If you have, let's say you're living in your condo and you have a house guest staying with you for a few weeks, and during that few weeks you go away for a couple days for vacation or for medical reasons, that's acceptable even if it's less than 30 days. But if they're paying for their stay, or if you're not residing in the apartment with them contemporaneously, that is illegal under the law.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would mean that maybe 50 to 75% of the listings that are Airbnb and having to do with New York would all be illegal, because not too many people really want to come in and stay for more than 30 days when they're coming into New York. Am I correct?
Certainly that's accurate. And you can take it a step further, in a literal reading of the law calls into question whether people can, let's say if they own a place as a pied-à-terre and they're there for a few days every couple of months. If they want to have, let's say, a brother or a sister or a parent stay in their apartment when they're not there, under the clear letter of the law, that would be unlawful. So it's kind of assumed that the legislature is not trying to crack down on those instances. It's really the instances where people are renting their apartments to transient tenants who come and go. In some of our clients that are mostly condominiums and co-ops, there are people living with young children, and there are safety concerns that are associated with this type of use.
Well, I can understand that, but on the other hand, Stephen, I say I own a condo and I've spent good money for it. Times are tight, need a little money. What's the big deal? Couple of weeks, let somebody from Paris come in and stay. I can pay the maintenance. I can pay the real estate taxes, whatever it is. Who are you to tell me it's a condo? Why can't I give me a couple of weeks just to make some money? What's the problem with that?
Well, there are a couple problems. First of all, bylaws are the rules that govern living in a condominium. And there are many, many bylaws out there that actually say that if you're going to rent your apartment, you can't do it for any less than 1 year. Okay, so that's for starters. So who am I to say? Well, the building is saying it because you bought into a building that already has that rule. But if you don't have that rule, this amendment to the multiple dwelling law makes imminent sense because, as I hear from our hundreds of condominium clients in New York City, that when people rent their apartments for these short periods of time, what's the harm? And they can make a couple $100 here and a couple $100 there. There's no vetting process other than maybe through Airbnb or Craigslist they're doing it through. And you could get some lunatic coming in and staying in the apartment next to you or next to somebody else. It's a huge, huge security concern. And that trumps anyone saying, well, I need to make some extra money.
Now, how would you respond, Jared, to the accusation that, well, this is really the hotel industry who really has a problem with this. The hotel industry is losing monies. New York, taxes. It's really a behind-the-scene attempt for a grab of money again by the hotel industry or by, just the New York City Tax Department. How do you respond to that?
Right. So I think it's more than that. And if you look at the legislative history of the law, you'll see that the real purpose behind this law is intended to protect against the fire hazards and other safety concerns that are associated with this type of practice. For example, hotels are built for transient occupancy, so they have a certain number of fire staircases. They have, if you've ever stayed at a hotel room, you see that every single room has kind of a map of where to go in the event of a fire on that floor. So they're constructed to provide for this type of short-term occupancy. In stark contrast, condominium buildings, co-op buildings are built for permanent occupancy for long-term tenants or residents. So if you have someone in the building, and let's say, God forbid, there was a fire, the safety implications for the permanent residents is a major concern, but also for the people who are renting these units on a short-term basis because they may not know where to proceed in the event of a fire, how to evacuate the building.
Well, that's a good point, but Stephen, let me ask you a question here. Verification, I mean, I do own a co-op, and people coming in and out say that they're the uncle of somebody who's in a unit or an aunt or a friend, and I'm just staying. Who's to verify that they're really paying the owner of the co-op?
David, that's a great question. The payment part is the hardest part, but that usually falls into place. When you have uncles, cousins, and aunts coming in from different countries all over the United States, maybe every 3 or 4 days, that's a huge red flag. Okay. And they're not staying there for free.
So it's really the front line is the doorman who really should be asking, who are you?
Exactly. Doorman, security logs, and even what we recommend to a lot of our clients, surveillance cameras.
Okay. By the way, there are penalties here, am I correct? Let's say you don't abide by the condominium bylaws, right? You can be penalized, am I correct?
Absolutely. Most of our condominiums have the right to fine people for violating that rule. And also the new law that came into effect has significant penalties.
We discussed a little bit last week about the risk of damage to property, that people can come in and damage your property. But what we really didn't talk about, which seems to be what we're talking about now, is we have neighbors who who doesn't know listen, you buy a condominium, you expect to have some kind of idea who's going to be living across the hall from you. Is that one of the bigger concerns here?
Absolutely, and a lot of our clients in these situations have asked us to commence lawsuits against the owner of the condominium apartment who is engaging in this practice. And we've been very successful in obtaining temporary restraining orders or injunctions against these individuals to enjoin them from continuing to engage in this conduct.
And do you prove it through the surveillance? How do you make the case?
We prove it through surveillance, through logs with the concierge or door people. And the smoking gun is when we go online and find the Airbnb ad.
There you go.
And the judges eat that up.
Any tips to somebody who, from the perspective of somebody who's trying to get into the business, or should I say wants to get a unit in New York, and maybe somebody who wants to rent out to somebody? What would you say here?
My tip is simple.
Yeah.
Don't buy into a condominium. Buy a single-family home if you want to rent it out, or I think you can even do it in a two-family home. Don't do it.
They want to be in the city. That's the thing. No homes in the city. That's the problem.
Such is life.
Such is life. Any parting words? Where is this heading? What do you think, Jared? Do you think we're going to be cracking down on this, or is it going to fall through the cracks? Or luckily, guys like you are out there to make sure that Airbnb walks the line. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the fact that this new law passed very recently seems that the trajectory is headed towards cracking down on this practice. At the same time, actually right after that law was passed, Airbnb sued the New York Attorney General, and from what I can see from the court docket, it appears that they are trying to negotiate some sort of resolution, at least with respect to New York City enforcing the new regulations against Airbnb and presumably its clients. So we'll have to see how that lawsuit shapes up.
Well, I have to tell you, Jared and Stephen, this is certainly not something that we're going to solve tonight, and I'm sure we will be seeing it for at least the next year. And again, I expect you guys back on to let me know where it's going.
And it would be our pleasure.
Absolutely.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for tonight. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of tonight's show, be sure to check it out at www.bronxnet.tv. Also remember, if there is a legal issue or topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at davidlesh at bronxnet.org, or tweet us at Today's Verdict, and make sure to hashtag Ask Today's Verdict. For myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. I'm David Lesh, and we will see you again in 2 weeks with an all-new episode of Today's Verdict right here on BronxNet. Take care.